It's 2015 model sell-off at Franklin Toyota. Now is your best time to buy because every 2015 model must be sold.
At Franklin Toyota, save up to $5,000 off the new Prius or get 0 APR for 72 months.
Find it today at Franklin Toyota in Statesboro.
On this week's show, the Georgia Southern men and women's basketball teams continue their lengthy homestands with a few conference matchups. We'll have analysis and highlights as we welcome you inside the Eagles' nest. And welcome inside the Eagles' nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald, Mike Anthony. And Mike, we finally have a week where football really doesn't dominate the discussions. We can get into a little bit of basketball at this point, of course. There are a few more weeks until National Signing Day, at which point, again, basketball goes to the back burner and football again is up to the front. There are some commitments that are coming through, and I'm sure they're all highly regarded, and we'll have to just wait and see how many of those guys that committed actually signed with Georgia Southern. But at this point, let's get into some basketball. And Georgia Southern men and women have both had some reasons to be optimistic and some reasons to be pessimistic over the past just 1 week. You saw the guys play Thursday at home. You were thinking, who is this team? Then you see them play on Saturday and you're like, wow, they're a lot of fun to watch. The women, rather, was kind of the opposite. They played really well maybe on Thursday, struggled a bit on Saturday with Troy. Your thoughts on how the men and women are doing? Let's begin with ladies first. How Kip Drown's team's doing.
Well, for the ladies especially, but for both teams really, you see just how hard it is to go on a long road trip, win on the road in this conference. Not a whole lot doing for the women out in Texas, losing to Texas State, losing to Texas Arlington. I know Coach Drown was particularly disappointed in the Arlington game. They're a very good team, but the Eagles are just not very competitive at all in that game. But whatever he was able to say in the few days in between that and their first home conference game of the year, it must have worked. The Eagles came out against South Alabama, a nice win there, finally getting them into the W column for conference play. They drop a game against Troy on Saturday, so 1-3 for the Eagles now. Not a great start, but then again, based on what happened last season, just 5 wins all year for the Eagles. They're at that mark already this year. Looks like they should have not a lot of trouble surpassing that, not only overall wins, but in conference play as well. And you never know, if you win a couple of games against the right teams, this could be a little bit farther along than they thought they'd be in the rebuilding process. You could be looking at the Eagles in that last couple weeks of the season fighting for one of those spots to get into the tournament. Angel
McGowan seems to be red hot lately. She's been able to hit some threes and penetrate and score as well. And then you have the Butlers inside who have both been doing pretty well, especially over the last couple games. They each had 13 points in the Troy game, so some reason to be optimistic about the personnel for Georgia Southern right now.
A great inside-outside game. There are some shooters. They had those last year. One thing that Coach Drown did note, even at the beginning of this year of the season, is the size that the Eagles have. They can have a low post presence that not a lot of teams in the Sun Belt have. However, they have to develop it. Right now, it's still a work in progress. I know a lot of these girls were on the roster last year. In fact, only losing one from last year's team. However, with a new coaching staff coming in, you've got to learn some new X's and O's, some new terminology, really getting used to, even though it's the same girls, maybe some new rotations, playing with some different girls out on the floor. So I think that we've seen the baby steps, and it's just a matter of time before that starts to click. And even if the wins don't pile up, I expect to see a lot more consistent games, not a lot of those blowouts like they suffered out in Texas.
All right, well, let's split up the 2 games from Thursday and Saturday. The women played better on Thursday. Let's show the highlights from the South Alabama games. Coach Kip Drown leading his Lady Eagles into battle, the first of 2 at Hanner Fieldhouse as they host South Alabama. We moved to second half action. The Eagles down by 3, but Angel McGowan leading a comeback. First 1-3, then another. The Eagles up by 3. The Jags answer with a 3 from Colby Davis in the corner, tying things up. But Angel right back. 2 more of her game-high 26 points. Later, Trell English-Lurie drives, stops, and pops. Nice bounce there. Patrice Butler later knocks down the jump shot right here. She finished with 13 points and 8 rebounds. More from McGowan, another 3. The Eagles with 9 from behind the arc on the night, including this one from Alexis Sams. Eagles by 8. And finally, it's Butler somehow managing to get this one to fall. She even has to crack a smile about it. The Eagles win 57-43. To the guys' game we go. Georgia Southern looking for their first conference win of the year. Early on off the miss, the big man Monte Glenn showing the nice moves. Trouble was, there were plenty of misses unaccounted for. The Eagles shooting only 26% from the field, 11% from three-point range in the game. The Jags go on an 8-point run right here. The Dunk finishing things up. The Eagles with only 8 total field goals in the first half. Here's a few. Tukey Brown, 2 of his 17. Ike Smith drives and hits the floater. More from Smith. The hoop and the foul. He'd finish with 20 points. Mike Hughes later driving in for 2 of his 9 points in the game, cutting the lead to 4. Jake Alsmiller with a rare non-3-point shot. This cuts the lead to 2. But the Jags then go on an 11-2 run to end the first half. Kevin Williams with a couple of threes. He'd finish with a game-high 22, and the Eagles fall 64-58. All right, Mike, well, let's get into the guys. And Mark Byington's team has been a little bit up and down so far this year. We know they're dealing with a lot of newcomers. They're also relying a lot on the shooting. And when you rely on shooters, sometimes you're going to have hot nights, sometimes you're not. This past Thursday against South Alabama, not so hot. I think 27% for the game, or right around there, and 11% from 3. And then you flip that around and you play Saturday against Troy, and things were going a lot better, shot a lot better, and picked up a big win in double overtime.
Definitely a Jekyll and Hyde performance, and you'll see a lot of that with young teams. There are different facets of the game that one night, one thing might be working. The shots are going down, but the coaches have to talk to you about defense, have to remind you about that. So the next night you come out, there's a renewed focus on defense, then the shots stop falling. You saw that on Thursday night, just 3 of 26 from behind the arc. That's where this Eagles team can really make its hay, but they weren't doing that on Thursday. South Alabama, not the most talented team in the conference, but if you spot any team that many missed shots, and they were controlling the rebounds there, South Alabama able to walk out with a win, but in just 2 days' time, they get it turned around against Troy. A lot of times with a young team, all you need is a spark and everybody can catch fire. Jake Alsmiller, he was brought in 2 years ago as a sharpshooter, a 3-point specialist. He comes out, hits his first 3 of the game, scores 9 of the Eagles' first 11 points. Everybody kind of took their cue from him. All of a sudden, everybody was hot. Tukey Brown, Ike Smith, they've both been great as true freshmen. They continued that. And then Mike Hughes having one of his best games of the year as a sophomore really shows what happens when a couple of leaders step up. It's hard to say senior leaders, there aren't many of those, but sophomore leaders now, once they started doing their part, it's a lot easier for the younger guys to fall into line.
It also seems like tempo has played a big role in some of the Georgia Southern victories and maybe contributed to some of the losses. South Alabama seemed like a team that was a little more content to play, a little more half court, slow it down, eat the clock, and then, take a shot, whereas Troy was seeming like they wanted to run up and down the floor a lot more. Seems like this Georgia Southern team tends to like to run up and down a little bit more and kind of get into that kind of a tempo.
I'm talking to Coach Byington this week, he brought that up, that he can see it in his players' eyes that they're starting to get it, and I think what he means by get it is just realize how you have to adapt to the college game. All these guys, for any team that the Eagles play, and for the Eagles themselves, you figure that in high school they were a star player, or at worst a number 2 player, and they could kind of impose their will on a game. They could make things go their way. That's not so easy to do at the college level. I think that these young guys were willing to get pressed into other teams' styles of play, but in the Troy game you could kind of see the Eagles. They got out some hot shooting, got a big lead. Troy punched back. They saw them come back twice last year to beat the Eagles, and I think Coach Byington saw his team finally put their foot in the ground, really forced the issue, and at the end, the shots were there for the Eagles, and I think what was most important to see was at the end of overtime with Troy trailing by just possession, 2 of the best defensive possessions of the season for the Eagles, forcing almost a shot clock violation, and then on the final drive of the game, not even allowing Troy to get inside the perimeter before they were forced to put up a shot.
All right, well, let's get back and see highlights of the women and the men, which particularly pay attention to the guys because they picked up a big victory this past Saturday against Troy. Georgia Southern in the first of two at Hanner Fieldhouse Saturday, hosting Troy. In the women's matchup, first half, Sierra Butler ahead for 2 of her 13. Next, back inside we go, and this time it's Patrice Butler, 2 of her 13 points. The Butler game continues as Sierra puts in 2 more. Later, off the miss, it's Angel McGowan with the rebound and putback and the foul. We're tied up here. Next, off the loose ball, Trell English-Lurie ahead of the pack. Eagles take a 2-point lead, but the Trojans answer from downtown. Kelly Beverly, 3 of her 23. The Eagles try and respond. English-Lurie with a 3 herself. Next, it's McGowan, 3 of her team-high 23 points. But Troy proving to be too much. Beverly hits another 3, and they win 81-66. To the guys' game we go. Georgia Southern still searching for conference win number 1. The pace fast and furious throughout. Mike Hughes for 3. Next, the Eagles go inside, and nice post moves here by Coy Simmons. He'd have 10 points in the game, 1 of 5 Eagles in double figures. Troy cuts it to 1. Sean Hopkins for 3. The Eagles quickly answering. Tukey Brown, 2 of his 19 in the game. Next, Devontae Boykins gets free inside for 2. Eagles by 5. Troy responds. Inside they go to B.J. Miller, 2 of his 17 points. Up by 4. Boykins on the break for 2 more. Eagles take a 6-point lead. Ike Smith then penetrates and finds Simmons for another jump hook shot. Georgia Southern with an 8-point lead. Smith then driving, stopping, and scoring 2 of his 16 in the game. Back come the Trojans. Jordan Varnado backing in for the jump hook. A big night for Mike Hughes. Here driving in traffic for 2 of his game-high 22. And finally, Hughes from downtown. This one eventually going to overtime where the Eagles come out on top 93-88. Next up for Georgia Southern, they'll be entertaining the teams from Louisiana. First, they have Lafayette on Thursday, doubleheader at Hanner Fieldhouse. That game is also meet Coach Tyson Summers. If you'd like to come there and meet him, he'll be around, and it's also a blue out. Then on Saturday, they have Monroe coming to town, and that game is going to be where they'll be recognizing the GoDaddy Bowl champion Georgia Southern football team. One other note, I guess, before we go, the baseball team, their evening with the All-Stars coming up in February. We did find out Terry Pendleton will be the speaker there at that event. Well, for Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.